Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I've been wanting to make a vibrating table for so long and I finally got around to doing it. I designed and 3D printed my own, added a little motor, and now it's time to test it out. So let's see if it actually works and gets rid of all those bubbles in my gypsumite molds. So here I have made the top on my 3D printer and I had a piece of Perspex. So I used silicone sealant just to do little dots all the way around, and then I pushed the plexiglass on top of my 3D printed top layer. But I did leave a little gap like I showed you there just to make sure also my countertop is level. I will show you that my countertop is level. So I just made sure that the top of the vibrating table was going to be level as well. I didn't want some of the silicone bubbles to be thicker and then the actual lid was not, because once you put your mold on with the gypsumite, you also don't want it to be uneven and then half of the stuff runs to one side. This was the base that I made. It's got 4 recessed holes and it's got holes for the motor with a little hole in the center just so that the motor doesn't overheat. And those holes for the recess are where your springs are going to go into. I got some springs. My husband actually got me some springs. And I wasn't sure if they were going to be flexible enough, but we'll see just now whether they were or not. These are actually the feet that I used. They're actually for mirrors and they are adjustable. I got adjustable ones because I wasn't sure if I was going to need to adjust the height. And those are just feet. They're rubber feet that go onto the bottom of your bar stools or whatever. That will obviously just help with insulation of the metal feet. Those are the springs. Like I said, I wasn't sure if those springs were going to be bouncy enough. I think they are. I will do a few more tests. I have done more tests than the one that I did in this video. But I think it works fine. I don't think that I need to change the springs. I was going to epoxy the springs into the bases, but into the top plate and the base plate. But I decided I would just leave it with using silicone. And then this is the little motor that I got. I got it off Temu. It's a cute little vibrating motor, and I thought it would be ideal to use for my vibrating table. The recessed, the holes that were in the base plate fitted perfectly, and then those are the feet. The feet are high enough so that the motor is off your counter so that it doesn't touch the counter and your whole counter will end up vibrating. So those were the feet that will go underneath. So now I have already glued the feet on and I have screwed on the motor. I didn't think that you needed to see that. I used epoxy glue. It's a 2-part epoxy glue and it sets in 5 minutes, and it says it sets in 5 minutes. It definitely sets in 5 minutes. Some things say set in 5 minutes and they don't set in 5 minutes, but they did. So they were ready after, like I said, a few minutes. I did leave them longer than 5 minutes. I just wanted to make sure, but they were set in 5 minutes. I did test. So the springs there are going to go into the recessed holes. And like I said, I was going to epoxy, but I decided not to epoxy them because in case I do want to change them at any stage. But I think I'm going to leave it. I was just checking there again for some reason, just to make sure that the silicone had not moved, because the silicone does take a few hours to dry, and you should actually leave it for 24 hours, but it was dry within a few hours, enough for me to work with the top plate. So here I am just putting in the silicone to keep the springs. The nice thing is, if I do ever want to change the springs, I can always just release the silicone and put in new springs if I ever want to. Or if the springs ever give in, or if the top plate breaks or cracks or anything, at least I can take it apart. If it's epoxied in, you're probably going to have to break the entire thing to try and get it dismantled. So here I am just putting the top onto the base plate and lining them up. They did line up perfectly, which obviously they would have, because my recessed holes were in the same place on top and bottom plate. And there we are. Now I just got a big 5-liter water bottle, or 3/4 full of water, and I put it onto, that's my little Marshall playing with his turkey. He loves his turkey. It's not a real turkey. It's just, it's a little silicone rubber turkey. Anyway, so there I am just putting on the 5-liter bottle so that it would hold everything together, and the silicone was drying. Here I am just putting on a piece of slip mat. It's not new. I found it lying around. So I thought, well, that would be ideal for making sure that the silicone mold doesn't vibrate off the table. Because if I had used the perspex or plexiglass as a top layer, that it definitely, if your silicone had a nice flat base, the actual mold, then it would sit nicely on the plexiglass. But most of the molds don't have a solid base on them, so I thought I would put on a piece of slip mat so that it would prevent the molds from vibrating off the actual table. I didn't want to put any sides on the top plate because, like I said, it is 20 centimeters. I'm not sure if I mentioned that already, but the plate, top plate and base plate, they're 20 centimeters. And if I have a mold that's bigger, and I do, my one tray I think is 24 centimeters wide, it would not be able to go onto the vibrating table. Not that I think I'm going to use it for my trays, excuse me, and anything that's not very deep, because you can wiggle and jiggle and use your tool to get the bubbles out, but it would mainly be for your deep pouring. But I didn't want to put sides on just in case. So here I was just putting on my support again, and I was going to put on my 5-liter bottle again just to give it time to dry. Now here I tested it out. I was going to leave the sound in, but all it is, it's the sound of a vibrating machine. So I thought, no, I don't think you want to hear that. But you can see how this is bits of old gypsunite, little chips and pebbles, and you can see how it's vibrating all the pieces. And now this was the first attempt that I did. Now this mold is the lid of one of my jars, and it always has small little surface bubbles, and sometimes you can't see them until you actually look really closely, or you have a look at a photo and you can see the surface bubbles. Also, it has very sharp edges on the lid of it, and I normally have a big problem trying to get that smooth, even going around it with a tool or a toothpick or any object to try and take them out. So what I did was I put it on the vibrating table for about 30 seconds before Marshall, before I used a tool. Well, it's actually the back of it's a little paintbrush, just to go in the edges. But you can see the little fine bubbles coming up. So I left it on there for about 30 seconds, and it was definitely lifting the bubbles from underneath. And then what I did was took it off the vibrating table, and I gave it another squidge to try and get some of those air bubbles out, because like I said, those corners are an absolute nightmare. I have never ever got one out that's absolutely perfect. There is a video that I've done of one with, it's got a tassel on the lid, that I've put a little tassel on the lid, and even that one I sat for ages trying to get all the air bubbles out the actual sharp lip of the lid, and I still could not. And even there's surface bubbles, you can see surface bubbles all over the actual the item. So here, like I said, I'm now using my paintbrush edge just to get into, sorry, it is a bit off camera, but the vibrating table is 20 by 20 centimeters, so it's not big, it's smallish, but it does take up quite a bit of space under my camera. So I had to do that in the corner, and so I was just giving it another wiggle and a jiggle and making sure that hopefully all the bubbles were out, and then I switched it on. Now, I love saying this word, in hindsight, I should have actually left it for about 2 to 3 minutes. That is the suggestion for a motor that's not that powerful. The motor is quite powerful, but like I said, the springs are not very springy. They're quite stiff springs. So I should have left it for about 2 minutes. But I left it, I think I probably, in total, the 30 seconds or so before. And here, I suppose I could have timed it, but I didn't time it. You see, I only left it for another maybe 30 seconds. So in total, it was probably only in there for about a minute. I should have left it longer. This was one of my other lids. It's not the lid I was talking about. It's another lid which I did. And unfortunately, you can see the edges. And I did go around that with the tool, try to get them out. But you can actually see, excuse me, underneath there are some bubbles. But the bubbles that were inside have not risen to the top. This is the one that I have just done. And as you can see, there might be a handful of surface bubbles. Sorry, it went a bit blurry there, but you can see how smooth the surface is. It's actually chalk and cheese compared to the other lid. Now, if you have a look on the right-hand side there was one section of it that the lip part had a bubble. I'm just turning it around there. There it had a bubble and it was not perfect. But that and that one on the left-hand side there that I was talking about earlier, there were maybe five. So I can't say there were none. There were maybe 5 that you could notice, and this is under a camera. So there I was showing how the bubbles had risen to the top, whereas on the other one you don't get that many. So in hindsight, again, I should have left it in longer. Left-hand side, surface bubbles. Right-hand side, no surface bubbles. So I finally got round to making my vibrating table, and I think it works like an absolute dream. I am so happy with how it turned out, and if you've enjoyed this little build or got inspired to make one yourself, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe, I would really appreciate that too. So guys, again, until next time, have a great one.